Greetings, this is the coronavirus COVID-19 update for 2/29/2020. So this is where we start every day with Baidu with China's numbers, because China is still the largest area of coronavirus on the planet, although the West is trying hard to catch up, or other countries, let's say. Now, this is Baidu, which is a Chinese search engine like Google, and they have a site set up here with all these numbers. First thing I wanted to talk about is the timing on this. This is usually, if you get into this site, it'll say underneath epidemic situation, which is underlined in the white area, upper left hand side. It says updated to 2020-03/01/09/46. So that's 9:46 in the morning on March 1st, China time. And this is an update for the day before, which is the 29th of February. And it doesn't come out until 9:46 a.m. It's supposed to be out by 10. And normally the update period is from 7 to 10, and it's usually closer to 10. So it's almost impossible. 9:46 China time is 8:46 p.m. Eastern time zone in the United States. So it's almost 9 o'clock when this data gets ready. So it's kind of challenging to put a video together when you get the data at 9 o'clock in the evening. So these numbers are the same 6 numbers that appear on this chart every day. Confirmed diagnosis is kind of obsolete now, because that number is included in the cumulative diagnosis number of 79,968. And that's up 579 cases from yesterday. And we'll see why that happened, or where it happened, in a couple more slides. Suspected new cases 851, that's only up 132. Cumulative cure, that's what China calls it, a cure, which implies that they cured 41,000 cases, which didn't happen. So most people who get this coronavirus only suffer some flu symptoms, and they recover. They don't get cured, they recover. So they're confirmed to have coronavirus, but since their symptoms weren't very bad, they were sent back home, and at home they recovered. Then we have existing severe cases, and that's at 7,365, which is down 299 from yesterday. And that's suspicious. And then cumulative death, which is at 2,873 in China, and that's 35 people died from yesterday. Then if you scroll down on the same page as that initial chart that we just saw, you'll see this map, which does not change every day. The dark area in the middle is Hubei province, and that's where Wuhan is located, the epicenter of this global virus. Then if you scroll down further, you see some graphs, 2 graphs every day. And this is the first graph, and they just changed it a few days ago. So what this maps is new deaths, added cures, which is recoveries, and then added suspected cases and new diagnostic cases. So you can see that the number of deaths is up and down every day, but generally trending down. The number of suspected cases has been trending down for a long time, as those people don't have a very long wait now to be diagnosed. And then the number of new cases is up and down every day. And the number of recovered people is increasing every day on an upward trend, which is something you want to see. Then the next graph, we have the gold shows non-Hubei province, which doesn't have that much of an impact on the big scene in China, because Hubei province, is where everything is happening. That's still where almost all the cases are. So there's 570 new cases in Hubei, and only 570 79 nationally. Then if you scroll down more, you'll see this, which I haven't shown because usually I close the province Hubei so that I can see all the provinces instead of the cities inside of Hubei. But I decided to leave it open today because more is happening here than in the list of provinces. Not much is going on in the list of provinces. They're pretty much steady state. But here you can see Wuhan having 565 newly diagnosed cases, and that's out of 570 in Hubei. Then if you scroll down further, you'll see the search topics of the day. Now these are search terms. And they're search terms where Chinese people are looking for a story, a specific story, and they're trying to find it. So sometimes the search terms don't make any sense. So the number one story every day is the dynamics, what we just looked at, the numbers. So a lot of people get in to see what's going on today as far as numbers. Then Beijing, 3 are not allowed. That doesn't make much sense until you see the story. And let's just take a look at these stories. So we have 5 stories to look at today. So number 1 on the left, this is Beijing municipality. So this is the city of Beijing, the local government. And what they're doing, this Beijing 3, no authorized, these crazy search terms means these people are getting together today and telling people that you cannot come back to Beijing from Wuhan or any other infected area in Hubei province, or you're going to suffer some severe penalties for that. And that's basically what that means. There's all kinds of search terms, and there's a few different videos. They're all saying the same thing. We don't want you back in Beijing. And on the right, you can see Hubei province mapped out and where all the hot areas are in the province. Then this is the third story. This is, for some reason, I've lived in Russia and China, and sometimes people just try to beat the system. That's what life is all about, beating the system every day. So here's people who were caught with fake passes to get inside the city of Beijing. This is a community pass. So not only to get into the city, but to get into your community. Say you live inside the second ring road, which is real close to the interior. The first ring road basically is on the outskirts of the Forbidden City. Second ring road, third, fourth, fifth, and the sixth ring road will take you out to the airport. So these people have fake passes, and this is what really gets me about Beijing is people from Beijing, even though they're located in the city where the central communist government is located, they don't hesitate to beat the system. It's just they're always a step ahead of everybody else in China. And I'll give you an example of that really quick. If maybe 10 years ago, Beijing was getting just bombarded with new car traffic. New cars just Beijing is a spread out city, and a lot of people own cars as opposed to a city like Shanghai, where I also lived. Nobody wants to own a car in Shanghai. Everybody in Beijing wants to own a car. So Beijing, the city, incorporated this new system where they would read your license plate at every intersection. They dumped millions of yuan in it. And then the day they implemented it, they announced that they're going to implement the system where you depending on your last name or date of birth I think it was, you can drive every other day. So that forces people to carpool. So what happened after a month is Beijing had stacked up about, I think it was somewhere up near 100,000 traffic tickets, and they didn't have any addresses to ship the traffic tickets to. Why? Because people didn't buy their cars in Beijing. People were leaving Beijing, taking a high-speed rail to Tianjin, which is, not that far. It's, south and east. It's a coastal city, really close to Beijing. That's where that big chemical explosion happened a couple years ago. It's also where Tianjin University is. So people would go to Tianjin to buy new cars. So when they get caught, driving between the 5th Ring Road and the 1st Ring Road, which is something you're not allowed to do, you're supposed to. You can drive from the 5th Ring Road to the 4th Ring Road and then pick up public transportation, and you can go from the 4th Ring Road to the 3rd Ring Road and pick up public transportation. But people are driving their cars all the way into the inner city, and they got away with it by buying their cars outside of the city. People in Beijing are always beating the system. So here's the last story. The new plan, again, recommends the use of Qingfei Baidu, whatever that is. It's they're recommending the use of some herbal treatments in Chinese traditional medicine, but they're also coming out and saying they do not advocate the use of proprietary Chinese medicines for prevention. Okay, in other words, you can have some herbal tea if you're sick, and it does prove to help. But so does chicken soup. So I don't know how much it proves to help. But they don't advocate the use of Chinese traditional medicine to prevent the virus, just to treat it if you're sick, if you come down with some symptoms. So that's what that announcement was. The next on the agenda, we always take a look at this Johns Hopkins University. This is a research institute at the university, the Center for Systems Science and Engineering. And they've had this together now for at least a month. It actually happened at the beginning of January. They started putting this together. And it's changed a lot, and it's a really good thing to look at, a really good tool. So the new number for confirmed cases globally is right now at 86,960. So the first thing I do with this is I take a look at China's current numbers. So China is showing the cumulative number of cases right now at 79,968, where Johns Hopkins shows 79,822. So we're down, 140 some cases. So it's not that big of a number, but we're at over 87,000 now total. So I look at that just because sometimes it's off by several hundred or 1,000. So that's the first thing I do, is to try to figure out how up to date our Chinese numbers are. Then next, I usually compare 2 days. I'm looking at 3 here because just to show the alarming differences in the last 3 days of the 3 hotspots. So in South Korea, just 2 days ago, they were at 2,000 cases, then 2,900, now 3,500. So they're getting up there pretty big, considering, a week ago, South Korea was in the 20s. Then Italy went from 655 to 889 to 1,128 today. In Iran, 245 to 388 to 593. So I'm not going to keep all 3 days up here, but I just wanted to show the trend between the last 3 days. These are the 3 new hot spots in the world, and they're not in China. So first we'll take a look at South Korea. In South Korea, it's the same story every day. This area of infection is centered around a church, a religious sect. In this church yesterday, I took a good look at the church, and there are 1,000 different churches in this religious sect and 450,000 people in South Korea. So this is a big, communal church here. It's supposed to be a Christian-like church, but headed up by another person who thinks they're God or got a message from God or something like that. So there's a lot of followers here, and it's not the religion that we're knocking here, even though that's another topic of a discussion, a valid one. It's the fact that these people were actually sending people to Wuhan to recruit people as late as December, and that's how we got a link between South Korea and this area, which is a city of Daegu. And that's where the link happened between Wuhan and South Korea. So the news today, they report 800 more cases, even though they're doing a lot to prevent cases. You can see on the right, in the upper right-hand corner, we see 3 trucks driving by, and it looks like it rained behind them because these guys are disinfecting the city. So they're doing what Wuhan does and driving around just spraying disinfectant, mostly alcohol everywhere. And what's really weird, the Seoul Times, which is a pretty good-sized publication, doesn't even have anything on the front page about the coronavirus. And then the bottom left, you see a wedding party in mass, which I hope is not a thing to come, but it was for today. So the second hotspot is Italy. And Italy still does not know how the first case came about to be, in Italy. So, could very well be somebody from Wuhan decided, hey, let's go skiing in the Alps, and they were infected. But nobody really knows, and nobody knows how to trace it. Nobody knows how to look at the contact network, which is an important place to start with a virus, because the first wave of contacts that you're in immediate contact with, then those other people are in contact with other people, and it keeps going from there. But they don't know how to start researching this because they don't know who the first person was. But anyways, this area of Italy is the upper, some northern villages in Italy. And, there's a picture here of a Italian restaurant with waiters standing there and empty tables, because nobody goes out. This is not in the red zone, this picture. So they do have a red zone that they're treating just like Wuhan. It's boarded off, the roads are closed, and, there's no entering or exiting. There were some pictures in yesterday's video that showed this. So that's still happening, but they're still finding cases. And not only that, Italy is in this, southern central part of Europe, and people now, it says down here in the lower right, by Friday, the first cases reached the Netherlands. Why? Because a lot of, Europeans travel to Italy and then they go back home, and that's why we have this virus spreading all over Europe now. Even like yesterday, Croatia had their first case. It's just spreading, everywhere. So it's, but Italy does have this red zone isolated now. But, there are cases in other cities in Italy, including Rome. Then we have Iran, which right now went from 245 yesterday to 593. Nobody believes that number. Because why? Because if you look on the right here, there's 43 deaths. And the mortality rate is not, 9 or 10%. So if we really have 43 deaths, we have thousands of people infected. So this, there's no specific news coming out of Iran. We know that, the number of infections is spreading now because of a religious pilgrimage to a site inside of Iran, and people are coming from other countries. Just a lot of religions have a pilgrimage site where people from that religion go to. Sometimes it's Jerusalem, sometimes it's a city in Iran. So Saudi Arabia yesterday stopped the pilgrimage of its people to go to Iran, but not every country has. And yesterday it showed people, Iranian people, officials, disinfecting the holy place by spraying it down with alcohol. Then we have the Diamond Princess. I spent a long time yesterday on the Diamond Princess. I'm not going to do it again today, but there was a study that I found, and the study is, it's done in a graduate school of medicine for Hokkaido University, and that's a hot spot in Japan now. Hokkaido is that big, northern province that it's an island of it's where Sapporo is, the biggest city. But this, was submitted to be published on February 25th, accepted on the 25th, and published today on the 29th. But it's flawed. I read this, and it's, I don't know if this is for a dissertation or, a thesis or what, but if you look on the lower right here, one of these charts, it says close contact was defined as passengers with a confined case among their cabin mates. But that didn't necessarily happen. So why base a study on that? You have all this data, and you're thinking that this has to be that one cabin mate had to have gotten it from another cabin mate. Well, maybe a husband and wife. We had an American husband and wife where the husband was infected, the wife was not. But if they're both infected, if say one person comes down with the symptoms, and then a few days later the other person comes down with the symptoms, that doesn't mean that one got it from the other one. Maybe they both got it at a buffet table, because when this boat was still on lockdown, it was announced it was on lockdown, and it was, it went to a port and just docked and wouldn't let anybody leave. But most people were supposed to stay in their cabins, but they're still going out to, they're still participating in cruise ship stuff like, dining together and dancing together and, going to buffet tables together. So two people in a cabin could have gone to the same buffet table and both got infected, but one of them came down with symptoms first. But the reason I wanted to show this is because the other graph is pretty much makes sense. And if you look at the other graph, the orangish bars, the first person that left a cruise ship on the 20th, they disembarked a cruise ship, and I don't know why. Why would people get off of cruise ships? They meet somebody on an island that they like. But this person, that was a woman, got in, came down with a coronavirus, and she was diagnosed, and then they put the whole ship in quarantine. But that happened like a week later. But the one thing that this graph shows is in the orange that the passengers were infected first and reached a peak between February 7th and February 9th. But that's all passengers. Then the crew started getting sick. And unfortunately, the crew, once a lot of passengers were infected, they were limited to their cabins. And then the crew kept working, and the crew doesn't have cabins. They're all staying in a communal place, down below deck. And they don't have their own individual cabins. There's just a bunch of sleeping quarters all together. So you see one big blob, one big graph of orange things, which is, like a bell curve. And then you see the same in blue, which is the crew. So that's the only thing valid that this study shows. Then outside of the three hotspots, we have some other things I wanted to look at. Let's start with Singapore. Singapore went from 93 cases to 102, which isn't a lot, but Singapore is a small place. Singapore is nowhere near the size of Hong Kong. They're both really densely populated and highly populated. Singapore is a city-state. Hong Kong is a place. It's it's part of China, but it's like, one country, two systems kind of place. So it's, you need a passport to get into Hong Kong if you're anywhere else in China. Unless, Americans can get into Hong Kong, okay. But Chinese people need a passport. They need a passport for Macau too, and for Shenzhen. So there are economic zones where you need a passport even if you're a Chinese citizen, but other people can get in. So anyways, they went from 93 to 102, which is only alarming because Singapore is a pretty advanced society, and they were in the 40s, and they keep creeping up there. So they're a concern of mine. And the only news out of Singapore today was they're starting to link this, set all these cases to a particular area in Science Park. And that's the news out of Singapore. Then we have France. So what's going on with France? Well, their numbers keep going up too. Yesterday they were at 38, today they're at 100. So the president got made an announcement today that they're going to ban gatherings of more than 5,000, which is crazy. It should be maybe 500 or 200. So they're doing that, plus something a little funny on the right side. la bise, which is the French custom to greet somebody and give them kisses on, both cheeks, So that's not a very good thing to do when you're in virus land. You don't give kisses to greet people. So he said we should probably cut down on this a little bit and, cut down on public gatherings. So that's the news out of France today. Then we have Germany. Germany, I checked all the big German news sites, and the only one to have a story today was this one about experts in Germany. They're getting together and starting to develop their own policies and procedures and incubation timelines and stuff like that. They're trying to, define what they're going to do. But they went from 48 cases to 79. And one, if you read under the caption on the right, the Germans have determined that, taking somebody's temperature and, having them wear a mask is ineffective. But I don't know, it's working pretty good for China. You can't go to a grocery store without somebody taking your temperature and making sure you have a mask on. Like in Wuhan or like most cities in China, you can't go to any kind of store. So, it's China is effectively using, their criteria, and it's, working good. Their numbers are way down. The rest of the world is what we have to worry about now. And then in the U.S., Trump got together and had this news conference today and talked for probably 10 minutes about Afghanistan. Then he started to get on the subject. So unfortunately, we had a death in the United States, and more unfortunately, it was a woman who was only in her 50s, and she was looking pretty bad yesterday and the day before, and her doctor requested a coronavirus test, and she didn't meet the criteria for a coronavirus test, so they didn't give her one. So yesterday, she was put on an incubator, and she was, a respirator, not an incubator. She's not a baby chicken. So they put her on a respirator, and she died overnight, because she just got treatment too late because nobody knew she had coronavirus. So something the CDC came out with yesterday when she was, placed in critical and her doctor was raising hell because she didn't meet the criteria, the CDC came out and announced that they're going to change all the criteria. So they didn't make that specific on exactly what they're going to do, but one thing you have to do when you're defining a set of criteria for a test is you have millions of people in the United States who have the flu, and that's some of the same symptoms. So I don't know how they're going to define this test, but one thing we did learn yesterday is that the United States has only used 1,000 test cases, test kits, so far, and like South Korea is using 1,000 a day. So there's something wrong with our methodology. So that changed. Also, what changed, the United States went from, 14 cases to 15 when we picked up a person in Texas, and then 16th case was back in California. Then we repatriated 45 people from the cruise ship who had coronavirus, and that's how the number hopped up to 60. Now it's at 70, and the concern now is that we've got, I think, 7 cases that were community sicknesses. In other words, they got sick in the community. Nobody knows how they got sick because they didn't travel abroad. They didn't come into contact with somebody who traveled abroad. So it's getting kind of scary. Then there was another study. This is the University of Minnesota came out with this. I found this because I found the other study on the cruise ship. And what happened here was, they studied 72,000 cases and came out with a fatality rate or mortality rate of 2.3%. They don't call that either one now. They call it a case fatality rate, CFR, 2.3%. And the death from critically ill people is 49% or higher. And that's pretty alarming. Then the final thing that I do every day is take a look at this graph. As you can see, we were kind of tapering off from February 17th up through the 19th. And then now the cases are increasing again. And why are they increasing? Not because of China, because of hotspots outside of China, like South Korea, Italy, and Iran. So that's the reason we're increasing cases globally now. That's all we have for today. Thank you.